All I want for Christmas is the number 1 seed. Packers may very well have a chance to clinch that tomorrow night, Sunday Night Football, Packers Titans. Kyle, let's hit it.
This is Pulse of the Pack.
There's Bledsoe. Down he goes. And there's Reggie White. And that's that hump move. Reggie's coming again. And Reggie White. Reggie White's going to take over this game right now.
Begins the count. Takes the snap. He's got the quarterback. He's into the touchdown of the Packers around in front. 20 to 17. And 13 seconds showing on the clock. And the Green Bay Packers are going to be world champions, NFL champions for the third straight year.
Barr lays it up for Freeman, and it's incomplete. Or did he came in the catch at the 15? What are they going to roll it? He caught it. Touchdown. He did what?
He did what indeed? He caught a touchdown to beat the Minnesota Vikings, to knock them down a peg. And yesterday, the Minnesota Vikings had their Christmas dreams dashed and gone, and any hopes of the playoffs are gone. So I must ask, very simply put, to start this thing, Blake Elizabeth, what are the Minnesota Vikings? All done. They're all done. Sorry, the most complete team in the division. They are all done. Goodbye, Minnesota Vikings. We hardly knew ye. The most complete team in the division, the team that was going to knock the Packers off the NFC North pedestal, the Kings of the North, all that other happy horse shit that everything was thrown around all off season long. All done. Bye-bye. Goodbye, everybody. Happy to see that going on. Everything like that. This is Pulse of the Pack. We are here. It is December 26th. It is 2020 for another week. Thank God, only another week in this hell that has been 2020. But it's been a good year if you are a fan of the Green Bay Packers. They have a chance now with a win and a loss by the Seattle Seahawks to the Los Angeles Rams to clinch the number 1 seed. And they will know by the time that game kicks off if they very well do have that opportunity to do so. I am Jacob Westendorf. I am your host of this show, and you can follow me on Twitter at Jacob Westendorf. Behind me here on the controls, you can hit Kyle Hoffenbecker. You can find him on Twitter. He's at K Hoffenbecker. And if you can't find him, you can pretty easily find him through me I usually throw a couple Cartman memes at him every now and again, just once in a while, not all that often. And of course, joined by the great Jason Perrone, who was done playing Santa Claus for JJ. And was Santa good to JJ? That's my first question. That's the most important.
Santa, I think he's still coming. There's JJ is actually, he's in Minnesota now too for part 2 of his Christmas. So he's had 3 visits from Santa. So yeah, he's got a lot of stuff.
Lucky guy.
Got quite a haul.
Yeah, I was telling you before the show that I don't think you adequately prepared me for the spoiled nature that my daughter is 15 months old now, that she is going to get for the foreseeable future. We literally had to drive back to my house after we went to my parents yesterday and drop stuff off in my house because there was no way whatever we were going to get from my grandma's house, which is where we went afterwards, was going to all fit in my car, including the child and the passengers that we had, which it was crazy. It was a great day. It was fun. It was good to be in the midst of some family in the time that it's not been the greatest, admittedly, but it has been a good time, like I've mentioned, to be a fan of the Green Bay Packers. And it is a good time if you are Corey Linsley. Corey Linsley is back. He has been activated off of injured reserve. And that's exciting news for the interior of this offensive line, which kind of struggled last week. They are playing this week against Jeffrey Simmons, next week against Akeem Hicks in that Chicago Bears front. And then at the end of the season, in the postseason, you can run against guys like Aaron Donald and Ndamukong Suh and who knows whoever else they'll run up against. So getting this offensive line at full strength before they head into the postseason is a big deal. So, Jason, what are your thoughts with Linsley coming back on how the Packers may configure this offensive line going into the postseason?
Well, the one thing I do have to tell you then, for next year and beyond, because then Blake's going to be 2 batteries. You got to have every size and type of battery available. Otherwise, you're going to be in some trouble. You want to see a meltdown? Hand a child a toy that doesn't work because you don't have batteries in the house. So Offensive line, Corey Linsley. It can only help. Linsley's was having a great season before he went out injured. This means Elton Jenkins still gets to play on the offensive line. He still gets to play his left guard position, for which he was voted to the Pro Bowl. There is no Pro Bowl this year, but he did get a Pro Bowl nod. So congrats to Elton Jenkins, who is just turning out to be offensive linemen, as we know, to the fan base, are not sexy picks. Everybody wants a wide receiver or a running back. And I think in last year's draft, they did want a wide receiver, as a matter of fact. But sometimes you got to do the right thing. And Jake, I think you would agree the Packers did the right thing by drafting Elton Jenkins.
Yeah, I mean, think about it this way. You have a shutdown cornerback in Jair Alexander, and and he may very well be the best cornerback in all of football. And there is a legitimate argument to be made that Elton Jenkins is the best draft pick that Brian Gutekunst has ever made. Now, that's a discussion that we can have. And the good news is both of those picks are Packers. So the answer is we're happy to have both of those guys on our side. But I am happy to see that Linsley will be back. This is a good opportunity for this Packers offensive line to get right and ready for the end of the season. They really struggled last week against Derek Brown and Brian Burns in that Panthers front. And this is a week for the Titans have no pass rush. Their pass rush is horrendous. And, this is a good week to kind of get some of those reps in, if you will, to get them ready for a Bears team that does have a good pass rush, assuming they do in fact need to play that game to win, and then get into the postseason where you're going to face good defenses, good offenses, and be ready to roll. As far as the configuration, I think they're going to do what they were doing before Linsley got injured, and that is Bakhtiari, Jenkins, Linsley, Lucas Patrick, and then Billy Turner out at right tackle, and Rick Wagner moves back to the bench. But there has been some speculation, some calling for amongst the fan base maybe for Lucas Patrick to be benched. Jason, are you on that train?
I was going to ask you what your thoughts were on that. He did not have a good game last week, but it's week to week. And Lucas Patrick has played well outside of that one game. The thing about playing against a Titans team that doesn't have a good pass rush is if he goes out there and doesn't give up any sacks and has a really good game and he bounces back and he looks good, well, that's good against the Titans this week. It doesn't mean it's going to carry over and necessarily be that against the Chicago Bears. So I'm not ready to give up on anybody after one performance. I mean, to my recollection, I think that's the worst game Lucas Patrick has had from a visual standpoint. But to your point, Jake, yeah, that continuity is important. I mean, if you throw Billy Turner in at right guard, and Turner had his struggles at right guard last year, and I understand first year in a new offense, all that kind of stuff, and then you got Rick Wagner playing at right tackle. Now you've got a whole different offensive line there. I say if you've got the five that got you here, and Corey Linsley is back, then yes, you go with you ride the, or what was it? You dance with the gal the date that you brought.
Yeah,
leave it to me to butcher every possible cliche that there can be. So I say Patrick at right guard, Turner's having a great season at right tackle, and just ride and keep Aaron Rodgers clean.
I'm with you. Let it roll. I think Lucas Patrick is somebody that is upgradable from, but I think the offensive line takes a step back if Rick Wagner plays right tackle as opposed to Billy Turner playing right tackle with Patrick in there at guard. And then, this offseason, maybe you look into potentially replacing Patrick as a guard long-term. I think that, Patrick is probably one of those guys that in a smaller sample looks better than he really is. And he's had that this season. Obviously there are some games where he's gotten exposed and he's had some other games where he's played really well. He's done a good job, but I think that the instinct that we have is to throw, anybody out there. And I saw last week during the game is like, put John Runyon out there or, put anybody else out there really for the most part. But the big name that really surfaced throughout the course of that game was John Runyon. And it was just like, looking through all that, it's like John Runyon's only played like 100 snaps or something. I mean, it's not a lot. And a lot of those have been, in the midst of the game. It's not something that started and had the whole week to prepare or anything like that. So it's been, an up and down bit of a year, but I think that asking a 6th round rookie to jump in now and be your starting guard is something that you should only do in case of an injury emergency. And now, the Packers with getting Linsley back will have an opportunity to do something like that with Rick Wagner moving back to the bench and kind of playing that swing tackle type of role that he's been able to do. So I'll be interested to see what they do, but it's good to have the Hogs in front ready. We do have a question here from Kim. He said, is Williams playing Sunday? If not, looking forward to seeing Dylan play with his size and speed. And Jamal Williams is listed as doubtful with a quadriceps injury. The Packers have had one player in the recent past play with a doubtful designation, and that was Kevin King last year against the Dallas Cowboys. Kevin King of all people, which, considering his reputation, was interesting nonetheless. But Jamal Williams is probably not going to play tomorrow. I'm interested to see how the Packers split their backfield, because last week they had 8 or 9, it depends on who you ask, called runs after halftime, or 8 or 9 executed runs. I shouldn't say called runs after halftime. And there really wasn't much of a reason for the Packers with their getting, 8 yards of crack to attempt to pass, but they did. And A.J. Dillon had that one carry for 18 yards. And I certainly thought, I think the clamoring for him all season has been something that I understand, because he's a rookie, he's new, he's exciting, and he's, got those big legs and everything like that. And he's a hard guy to bring down. And Packers fans see who's across the field this week and wonder if they've got a guy just like that. But at the same time, right now, Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams are better players. And, now though, with Williams being out, I thought last week was a great opportunity to get Dillon some reps, especially with the way you were running the ball, just kind of move the ball that way. But they chose not to, for whatever that reason was. They chose to keep Aaron Jones on the field and kind of nail Dillon to the bench. So I'll be interested to see if tomorrow becomes a day where it's a lot of Aaron Jones, like 85% of the snaps type of Aaron Jones, or if they do what they've normally done, which is kind of split by the series type of thing. So that'll be interesting. I'm not sure. What are your thoughts on the backfield, Jason, as we go into tomorrow?
You play your best players, and Aaron Jones is that, because at one point last week, or maybe I'm thinking of the Detroit game, Aaron Jones, maybe it was Detroit, where Aaron Jones just was not out there to the point where I was asking in our Slack chat, is he hurt? Did I miss an injury? Is Aaron Jones not healthy? So he's your breakaway guy. And A.J. Dillon just doesn't have enough snaps to carry a 50% load. I don't know if I'd be comfortable with A.J. Dillon running 50% of the time. So it's going to depend on the game. If you have, listen, if the Packers have to make that decision and it becomes a difficult thing for Matt LaFleur to have to figure out, it probably means the offense is moving and things are good. So that's a good problem to have. If it doesn't matter whether Aaron Jones gets the ball or not, because Aaron Rodgers had to throw it 55 times because the Packers got behind, then that's not a good place to be in. So you have to take, like you said, into consideration, because you mentioned Runyon and his snap count. Well, A.J. Dillon's snap count is minuscule compared to that. So, and I'm not saying that he doesn't know how to play running back, but maybe one of the reasonings for letting him sit was because he had a nice run. Let him ride that into the following week. It's kind of like when you sink the half quarter on the basketball court. You kind of just walk off the court and let that be your last shot for the day and leave on that note. So, but Aaron Jones is your home run threat. So you've got to get him involved. And I do hope that he's kind of motivated by the fact that everybody's talking about the guy on the other side of the field, on the other side on the other team. And no one's talking about Aaron Jones. And Aaron Jones could actually end up very well being the stat king once this game is all said and done. And I don't think either of us would complain if that happened.
Nope. Especially since nobody cares about my fantasy team, but I have Aaron Jones on it. So I would appreciate some points on that regard. But more importantly, I'm looking for the Packers to win the game. And I think that part is the part that's been most interesting, is the amount of people this week that are chalking this game up as a game the Packers have no chance to win, because their bad run defense has no chance of stopping Derrick Henry. And it's just, I've seen this happen before. Like the Packers played against Adrian Peterson all the time. They won plenty of games against the Vikings with I was at a game where Adrian Peterson ran for 200 plus yards and the Packers won by 2 possessions. It does happen, and it happens pretty frequently. If you look through the amount of running backs the Packers have played this year, they've beaten Dalvin Cook, they've beaten Alvin Kamara, they've beaten guys like that. When you say running backs don't dictate wins and losses like that, yes, obviously the Titans' best player is Derrick Henry, and their identity revolves around Derrick Henry. I'm not saying that, but when you look at this matchup, let's just assume the Packers have the worst run defense in the NFL, and they don't, but let's assume they do. On the other side, the Titans do have one of the worst defenses in the NFL, the worst pass rush. They're the worst on third down, and they're one of the worst in the red zone. Gold zone, excuse me. The Packers have Aaron Rodgers, an MVP quarterback. That is something that matters much, much more to them, in that they have that guy on their side against that defense than Tennessee having their guy on their side against Green Bay's defense. So if that makes sense to you, I know I just jumbled a lot of stuff all together at the same time. Green Bay has the advantage. And I posted a tweet this week, a poll. So do you have one game you need to win? Who do you pick? Aaron Rodgers or Derrick Henry? 95% of you voted for Aaron Rodgers, and it was 500 plus votes. So it wasn't a
and
very
the other
small.
5% were, and the other 5% were lying.
The other 5% were lying. That's very possible. But you need that. So 95% of you, let's assume everybody's telling the truth. That's not a small sample that you have there. With that in mind, I mean, how does the team with the quarterback and the MVP candidate have no chance to win a game like this? I just refuse to see it that way, especially when you look on the other side of the field. Yes, the Titans have a very good offense. The Packers have a better defense than the Titans do, and the Packers have a better offense than the Titans do against their defense specifically. So the matchup is actually in favor of Green Bay almost in all facets of the game. So take me through some of that as how you're feeling going into this matchup, just in a general sense, and then we'll break it down a little bit.
I think it's just the first and the obvious headline is who's got the quarterback. And Ryan Tannehill is having a great season. I didn't realize statistically he's doing well. 31 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Those are some Aaron Rodgers numbers. So that's impressive for a quarterback like Ryan Tannehill, who was cast away and labeled a bust. And look, he didn't get a fair shake in Miami by any stretch. But he has, worked his way and kind of settled in nicely to the Titans offense. And it helps when you have a running back like Derrick Henry, who's going to carry the rock 25, 30 times for 4 or 5 yards a carry and do the kind of damage that he does. But the Packers have a huge advantage. They've got Aaron Rodgers, and Aaron Rodgers can taste the blood in the water. He wants that 1 seed. He wants that home playoff game. And this year in particular, getting on an airplane, probably not the best proposition for anybody, let alone an entire football team. In fact, not to conjure up bad memories, but 4 years ago when the Packers had to travel to Atlanta for the NFC Championship game, not only were they banged up and injured and hurt, but a bunch of guys got sick. And then they had to get on an airplane, and that thing's like an incubator. So in this time right now, play at home and let everyone else come to you and let them deal with all the woes of travel and all the virus stuff and all that other stuff that's going on. Now, I'd say that obviously also hoping that nobody gets sick. I don't want to see the NFL punished that way. But Aaron Rodgers is that's the biggest thing for me, is for all of the fear that you have that Derrick Henry is going to wreck this game. And I think we probably have to remind everybody that it's all relative. What does wreck the game mean? If Derrick Henry goes off and gets 175 yards rushing, breaks off a 50-yarder, but he doesn't score any touchdowns and the Packers win the game, did he wreck the game? Even if the Titans do win the game, Derrick Henry doesn't score any touchdowns, did he wreck the game? So don't forget, there's other weapons. You got Jonnu Smith, you got A.J. Brown, you got Corey Davis. There are other ways that the Titans can beat you. And if Ryan Tannehill is that efficient with those weapons, now A.J. Brown is a great receiver, but Corey Davis, Jonnu Smith are, they're okay. Then that tells me that there's a lot to prepare for. And I hope Mike Pettin has been taking his 5-hour energy this week. I guess that's kind of how I'm feeling. I think the defense is up to the task, but they've got a lot more than just Derrick Henry to worry about.
That they do. And you mentioned those weapons. You've got Corey Davis, who was a top 5 pick. He's having a very good season this year in a contract year. A.J. Brown is the best receiver in that draft class, not named DK Metcalf. He's been very good for the Titans, obviously. Jonnu Smith is a very good tight end. And then obviously everything runs through Derrick Henry. Their offensive line has been good enough without Taylor Lewan. That's been something that's been interesting. And they've gotten almost no production out of their first-round pick, Isaiah Wilson. And it's been kind of interesting to listen to the way Mike Vrabel talks about him, but that's beside the point, just as all that stuff has gone on. But the Packers, yeah, they have a tall task in front of them. You know what? You have a tall task in front of you anytime if you're facing a good team. That's how this works. And good teams are able to find those matchups and able to slow them down enough. And I think the Packers do have an opportunity to do that, because you do know on any given play, one of those receivers is going to be matched up with Jair Alexander. So that's a matchup that you like if you're a Packers fan. The other one obviously is Kevin King. That's a matchup you like if you're a Titans fan. Shannon Sullivan can certainly hold his own against whatever slot receiver the Titans are willing to throw out there at him. Jonnu Smith is somebody, he's a very good tight end. And the Packers have had the ability with some of their safeties with Adrian Amos and Darnell Savage. And maybe we see more Vernon Scott tomorrow with Will Redmond being out for the game with a concussion. I don't know. But I think the Packers have a way to take advantage of some of those matchups, and they're good enough up front to slow some of those things down against this Titans offense. And that's what you're going to have to do, is press and hit those guys, because we've seen it where a team like this has come in, a team like the Titans has come in against a team with an elite quarterback and a great offense. And everybody said, how are they going to slow down Derrick Henry? Well, the Kansas City Chiefs did it last year. And the way you do that is to score. And the Titans defense is able to be scored against. Their secondary is awful. Their pass rush is not good either. Their linebacker play is not great. There's not a whole lot of good things going on that Titans defense. So the one thing I did want to get to was when we were talking about receivers and such, my thought is that A.J. Brown is a special player. And I think Corey Davis is a good player. My thought on it is that the Packers should, and they haven't done a lot of this, but they do some of it, is 23 should be following A.J. Brown wherever he's at on the field. And they should have, if Corey Davis and Jonnu Smith beat you, so be it. That's how I would play it. I'm also not Mike Pettin, and Mike Pettin is a lot smarter than I am when it comes to drawing up defensive schemes and figuring out stuff like that. But that is the way I would play it. Jason, what do you think on shadowing Jair Alexander?
Yeah, Peter Bukowski said the same thing on Lockdown earlier this week. I guess you put your best players in the best position to succeed. So I don't hate the idea. It just doesn't disguise what you're doing there. But then again, you know, it also probably sends a message to Ryan Tannehill and to the Titans that you're going to have tough sledding all day getting the ball to A.J. Brown, because Jair just doesn't leave a lot of space between himself and the receiver. And if you take a page out of the great Bill Belichick's book, is you do what you need to do to win the game in front of you each week. And you don't necessarily just one size fits all and take the same approach to all of your games. You do what you need to do to win. And the Packers have a lot to gain in front of them, depending on what happens earlier in the day. But the Packers have a lot to gain in front of them. And it's, I don't care about the AFC, NFC, and it's, you know, it's not going to kill them if they don't win this game and all that. Win the game and wrap it up, especially if they have the opportunity to do so. So if that's putting Jair on A.J. Brown, because I can tell you right now, I don't want to see either Brown or Derrick Henry wrecking this game. And there's nothing more frustrating as a fan than knowing what the other team is going to do and watching them still come in and do it with regular success.
Well, and if you go to the other side of the ball, when the Packers are on offense, you'll be able to look at these two teams are built very similarly from the standpoint of they have, the Packers have an MVP quarterback. The Titans have an efficient quarterback, but they have really good running backs, one really good wide receiver. The Titans have a better second receiver than Green Bay does. The offense as a whole is probably in favor of Green Bay just because of their offensive line. That being said, when the Titans are on defense, you're going to be looking at the same kinds of things. And that for them, you mentioned that frustration. They know they're going to get Aaron Jones. They know they're going to get Devontae Adams, and they just don't have anybody to stop those things. And that is my thing for why I think the Packers can have a huge week on offense this week is, you know, if you've got a way to take one of those stars out, it makes things a lot harder on the Packers. You saw that. You know, I know this game was kind of a Murphy's Law game, but Tampa Bay really can take Aaron Jones out of the game because their running defense is one of the best in all of football. And honestly, we'll talk about this if and when they match up with each other again in the postseason. If the Packers play the Bucs in the postseason, I don't care to see them run the ball more than 5 times in that game. Like, dead honest. Take a page out of the way the Chiefs face them and just throw it all over the lot. But that's beside the point. That's another game. The Titans can't really take away either one of those things. They struggle against the run. They struggle against everything. They struggle against offense. That's just kind of how it works. So if the Packers are able to do what they normally do, stay ahead of the sticks, and keep everything in front of them as far as the way they normally do things on offense, I think they have a big chance to have a big week on the offensive side of the ball. Joining late, Adam, it's good to see you're here as usual. Yes, we did talk about Corey Linsley being activated. He's up and running, so we're happy to do that. Anyways, I think it's a big week for the Packers, but what I want to ask of you, Jason, is obviously at some point, Mike Vrabel's not an idiot. You know, I remember we used to have a coach say, you know, you could scheme it to death. You could scheme these things to death, and every play looks great on the whiteboard, and at some point, players are going to make plays. But seriously, at some point, they are going to do something to try and take Devontae Adams away on a given play or two. With that in mind, who is the guy that you think on offense that steps up for the Packers this week outside of their triplets of Aaron, and Devontae?
Alan Lazard. I have every faith in Alan Lazard. He had an off night against the Carolina Panthers last week. but I think he came on big at the end of the last season. And I have no problem thinking that Alan Lazard can't be that guy. And I guess I should have probably been clear in terms of wide receivers. I mean, it's in all honesty, it's probably going to be Robert Tonyan. I said Tonyan on another show earlier today, and I need to atone for that mistake. Robert Tonyan has become Aaron Rodgers' go-to guy. For all of the things we thought Jay Sternberger was going to be, we were right about the numbers and the production. It just wasn't the right guy. So between Tonyan and Alan Lazard, I have no concerns about, and listen, Marquez Valdez-Scantling didn't get a catch last week. He's going to catch some balls. Like the Titans defense, and you said it already, Jake, like especially the pass defense. If there's an area where the Packers are strong on offense and the Titans are weak on defense, like that's what tilts the scale for me right there. Is Aaron Rodgers against his pass defense. All these guys can step up and make. I mean, Mercedes Lewis could even be that guy. It could. You said no triplets, so I can't say Aaron Jones out of the backfield, but they're going to have plenty of opportunity as long as they keep Rodgers clean. And I say that to say the Packers should have an obvious opportunity here, but I've also seen some really good Packers teams not take advantage of obvious opportunities in some games before. So I don't want to see it be a game where the Titans have this anomaly night and sack Aaron Rodgers 4 times when they have 4 sacks on the entire season. But with Corey Linsley coming back, I'd like to think the offensive line will get their job done. So pick a guy, but I think Robert Tonyan and Alan Lazard are going to be 1 and 2 there, and maybe MVS is a distant third.
Okay. I like MVS, and Adam brings that up in the chat. I think that he kind of, the MVS wave, right? We played the roller coaster game with him. Well, last week he didn't do anything. So this week is the week for him to do something. I think he has an opportunity to get deep on this defense. Titan safety play has been rancid this season. Kevin Byard, who we used to all make fun of Deion Sanders for because Deion Sanders called him a fan, and then he led the league in interceptions that season, which is hilarious to me that happened. But he hasn't played all that well. Kenny Vaccaro, not really either. So the good news is I think the Packers, you know what you're going to get with their offense. And the reason their offense is as good as it is, they have Aaron Rodgers, they have Aaron Jones, they have Devontae Adams, elite players in that regard, all 3 of them. They have an elite offensive line. And then their secondary pass catchers could be a variety of guys. The issue they had last week was their other guys. Lazard had a rough game. MVS didn't really do anything. Tonyan had a touchdown, but he was kind of quiet other than that. Packers offense as a whole was just kind of clunky after they took that 21-3 lead. But I think that is the exception and not the norm. And I think that there's an opportunity also for this defense to make a bit of a statement as well. The people are forgetting, like, the defense played well last week against a good offense. Carolina's offense is one of the better units in football. They have some weapons. They don't have a quarterback, but statistically, they've got a pretty good group. And from a player by player standpoint, DJ Moore, a good player. Robbie Anderson's the guy everybody wanted in Green Bay. He's a good player. Mike Davis is not Christian McCaffrey, but he's a good player. And Green Bay really held them almost dead silent until essentially, 21-3, where if you're a team built like the Packers, you like your chances of putting a game like that away. A couple other notes that I do want to point out, and this comes from Team Degenerate, my friend Matt Bove, and our gambling expert, wagering of jelly beans. We would never, ever, ever encourage the wagering of illegal gambling. But if you are into the wagering of jelly beans, the point that made is this. The Titans are currently, and this is stuff that matters, and I love pointing it out, and I love kind of finding the research on this kind of stuff. But the Titans are contending. This is their 4th road game in 6 weeks. They haven't had a bye since week 4. The Packers, by that token, also have had an extra day to prepare with them having played on Saturday. And Matt LaFleur also is playing against an organization that passed him over from Mike Vrabel. And reportedly, there wasn't the greatest of exits between Vrabel and LaFleur, which kind of makes sense when you look at their personality types. Vrabel's a very good coach, but he is also kind of a meathead. And Matt LaFleur is kind of an intellectual. And you could see where those two maybe don't get along. The Titans offense obviously wasn't very good that season. They went through the growing pains. And now Arthur Smith obviously has done a really good job there, but they've been allowed to reap the success of, this is year 3 of the Matt LaFleur offense. It's just year 2 of Arthur Smith running it in Tennessee. So he's probably going to get a head coaching job somewhere in the next couple of years. I just hope it's not Detroit for, I guess it won't matter if he goes to Detroit because who cares?
Black hole.
Yeah, it's black hole. You're right. But that's one of those things. This gets pointed out, obviously. The last real team the Titans played was Cleveland. Cleveland blew them off the field. And the narrative around this game is that they have no chance of stopping Derrick Henry, which may very well be true. But Tennessee having the worst pass rush in football Aaron Rodgers is lethal this season when he's not been under pressure. So again, a shout out to our guy, Matt, for putting that together. And he does that every single week. So if you need help on your betting advices, you definitely want to check that out. GameOnWI.com. That's kind of what I think about this matchup as a whole, is just, it's the quarterback, guys. And we've seen this play out 1,000 times. The Packers had no chance to stop Ezekiel Elliott. You know how they stopped Zeke in that playoff game? 4 years ago now? It was 21-3.
21-3.
I mean, I'm not in a perfect world. Obviously, that's not how it works. Now, yes, do the Packers, have they had some issues? What happens if you don't do that? Yes, I understand all that. And I understand that you have the thought of Dalvin Cook in your head, and I get it. And I understand you have the thought of last year's Niners game in your head, and I get it. Here's the other point. The Packers have allowed to opposing teams' leading rushers since the Dalvin Cook disaster 69.3 yards per game. And that includes guys like Jonathan Taylor, James Robinson, Mike Davis last week, Miles Sanders. They did a whole lot of stuff like that. This is the ultimate test. I completely understand that. But the Packers, I think, are equipped to do it. And they have more playmakers on defense, and they're better to do things like that. And I'm almost getting into predictions, and I don't want to get there just yet. Question here from my bloodline here. Yes, I do. Last week I wrote an article this week for Pack Report saying the Packers have kind of sent some subtle messages to their veterans this week. Against the Bears, it was Rashawn Gary being a starter over Preston Smith. Last week, it was Chris Barnes was the green dot, and Kamal Martin played a little bit more. I think you'll see, in terms of snaps by the end of the game, I think the way that it'll go, assuming no injuries, Barnes, Kirksey, Martin. I think Martin just has some things he needs to clean up. He plays really fast, but he also plays a little OC at times. So
he's going to make the thing about Martin. He's going to make a great play every game. He's going to blow something up, and it could be Derrick Henry. And he's going to miss a couple times too, but he's young. And I'm telling you something right now, by next year, he could very easily have those things cleaned up, and he could be the green dot. And then if Chris Barnes is your number 2 linebacker, there's a lot worse you could do in the inside of that, in the middle of that defense.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think the Packers, I'm also doing this right now, thinking, they have a lot of guys that can be your second best linebacker. They need a guy who can be their best linebacker, somebody that can run that sideline to sideline. And I don't think they have that right now. The thing about Kamal Martin, like you mentioned, is he has those splash plays, which we all notice. And I don't think we notice when he screws up, because it requires slowing things down, watching it at a slower tape to notice when he messes something up necessarily. But they've done a good job of hiding. The thing that is a little frustrating to me is when fans are pointing out that, and I shouldn't say fans, I don't mean it that way, but people are pointing out that, Kamal Martin is graded better than these players, and the minimum is 100 snaps. Well, Kamal Martin has played just barely over 100 snaps. And when your sample size is smaller, you have less of a chance of being exposed. That's just kind of the nature of how this game works. And eventually you do get exposed in larger roles. We've seen that happen. I know Chandon Sullivan had a great game last week, but he's somebody that is an example of, he was a dime back last year and he was really good. And this year he's playing as a nickel, and he hasn't played as well. He's still played relatively well, but he hasn't played as well. So I'm interested to see what the Packers do at that linebacker spot tomorrow. I'm interested to see how they play the game as the whole. My thought is they should probably play nickel, because with the, a majority of their game in nickel, which they do a lot anyways. But, the thing against the Titans is you can't just load the box to stop Derrick Henry, because if you do that, then their wide receivers and their passing game is going to eat you. That's what makes this offense so hard to stop with everything going on in there. Before we get into, the last portions of our show here, I do want to give a shout out to our guy. His name is Andrew Mertens, and he's doing some video editing stuff for us over at Game On Wisconsin. So we have our first video editing, or our first pregame video, and it's Packers versus Titans. So I'm going to show that to you guys right now.
Rodgers looking for Davante Adams, cutting it to the inside, and there he goes. Rodgers looking right, throwing right. It is held on to. What a grab by Marquez Valdez-Scantling.
Bridgewater has the ball knocked out of his hand, and it's headed the other way. Kevin King, a disaster for the Panthers. Back to Aaron Jones, untouched left side. He'll get in. 3 drives.
Packers versus Titans tomorrow again at 7:30. Obviously, is kickoff time. You guys will be here for the pre-snap at 6:25 with Alex Strofe, Todd Varney, and Dan Kotnick bringing you up to kick off. Jason, let's get into our bold predictions for tomorrow night's game. The Packers will take on the Titans. Reigning Packers fan, thank you. Very much appreciate you saying that you love listening to us. My wife doesn't even love listening to me, so I'm thankful that somebody does. I appreciate that. Anyways, Jason, yes, bold predictions for tomorrow's game. I have two, one a little smaller, one a little bit bigger. So I'm interested to see. Let's start with you, and then I'll work your way to me. I'm the host, so I can do what I want.
You can, in fact. And our friend, the hedgehog over across the pond there, wants to know what's the weather forecast for game time. I'm going to give it to you in Fahrenheit because we're Fahrenheit over here. I think it's Peter. Is it Peter?
It's Peter.
Okay, right. 32 degrees and snow. So we could see one of those snow globe games at Lambeau Field, which is always a lot of fun to see. The first bold prediction that I have is that the Packers are going to get 2 takeaways in this game. And I say that because turnovers have not been, the Packers have not turned the ball over much this season, but they also have not gotten at them in big bulks. They had a big one last week, Chris Barnes. You saw that on the highlight there with the knockaway at the goal line, which probably saved the game for the Packers in the long run. And ended up allowing them to continue on and beat the Carolina Panthers. But I think the Packers will find a way to take the ball away twice. Derrick Henry has only fumbled once. Actually, it was in that game against Cleveland where the Browns beat the Titans. So he takes care of the football very well, but he very well might put one on the ground tomorrow. And I think the Packers need to make a point of emphasis to try to get after the football and steal a possession or two. Because as you'll see, when we get into our predictions, a few of us here, and I know there's only 2 of us on screen, are predicting a rather high-scoring game, which means 1 or 2 possessions in which a team does not score points could end up being very costly. So I'll start with that one there. 2 takeaways for the defense.
Yeah, I like this too. And I think that, the Packers I think this is a good thing for them that they're playing a team like this as late in the season as they are, because it gets you playoff, playing the soft underbelly of their schedule, which they had. And kudos, I say it all the time. You can only eat what's in front of you. And I know the stat that has surfaced this week a lot is that the Bengals have more wins against winning teams than the Packers do. And who gives a shit? The Packers can't control who they were playing against. It's not their fault that Minnesota took a dump after pretty much as soon as their season started. You know that 3 weeks ago, they were one of the 2 in the Saints 10-2. Apparently that win seems to keep getting forgotten when we talk about who have the Packers beaten. That story never seems to come up. That is what it is. That's all beside the point. I think this is good for them. My 2 bold predictions are, and this is number 1, I think A.J. Dillon scores his first touchdown tomorrow night. It'll be a bit of an ode to Derrick Henry being on the other side. Like Tyler Dunn pointed out this week, you don't want to get too much into the combine numbers, but bigger, faster, stronger, broad jump, all that stuff, better than Derrick Henry. Now, does that mean he's going to be better than Derrick Henry? Maybe not, but it'll be kind of fun to see him, I think, get into the end zone. His first career touchdown tomorrow against the Titans. Jason, you said 2 takeaways. I think both of them come to the hands of number 26, and that is Darnell Savage. He has been a different player since November 1st. And this is the part that I think a lot of the national media misses. And I don't blame them because they can't watch each team closely from the start of the season to the end of the season, the way that you and I do, obviously, when it comes to this Packers team specifically. They don't see which players are getting better. They don't see which players were there and aren't now, or are and weren't before. Darnell Savage was not this player when they played against the Tampa Bay Bucks earlier in the season. Darnell Savage was not this player when they played against the Minnesota Vikings in November. He has been on an absolute tear since November 1st. He's been phenomenal. I think JJ wants you to know that he does Fahrenheit. I don't know why I thought that was as funny as I did, but I do. He's been maybe the Packers' best defensive player. Obviously, you've got Zadarius Smith and Jair Alexander, and everything starts with those 2 guys. But right after that, Darnell Savage is turning into a star before our very eyes. And I don't use those words lightly. It feels almost like the trajectory that you saw at the end of last season with Jair Alexander. And that's something that this Packers defense, I'm telling you, they are 3/4 because Adrian Amos has been phenomenal. Shout out to Santa for getting me an Adrian Amos jersey for Christmas. That's phenomenal. Appreciate it very much. They have 3/4 of a very good base starting secondary. Shannon Sullivan is probably league average, above average as a nickel corner. If they can figure out that other corner spot opposite of Alexander, they're cooking. Now, that's not something they're going to figure out this year. What they need between now and the end of the season is good Kevin King to show up. And that's somebody that we're looking at there. But
Yeah,
those are my
Jake. You know what, Jake? My other bold prediction is I think the Packers are going to have maybe not exactly, but I think the Packers and the Titans, when you look at the box score at the end of the game, are going to have the same number of rushing yards each.
Wow.
And that is with the vaunted Derrick Henrys on the other side of the ball. But I want to ask you this because Darnell Savage, first round pick, a lot of pressure on GMs. Your first round picks have to hit. They really do. And the Packers maneuvered their way into getting Darnell Savage because they were able to move up back and they didn't take Derwin James the year before, but they ended up with Jair Alexander, which is a pretty nice consolation prize if you ask me. But Darnell Savage, and they're not the same player, but in terms of how valuable Nick Collins was, does Darnell Savage have an opportunity to be as valuable as Nick Collins was in his prime? I guess I'm talking specifically 09 to 2010.
Yeah, Savage's career has kind of taken a similar trajectory, right? Like Collins had those flashes his rookie season, so did Savage. And then obviously Savage's rookie season was derailed a little bit by an ankle injury, and then he wasn't the same player for a while. He did have some issues, but I think he's gotten better. They've started using him a little bit better, and they've raved about him since day one. I think you're going to continue to see what the Packers see in him. And I'm going to toot my own horn. I don't do that very often, but I'm going to. I had him rated as the best safety in that draft class, and they're starting to do some of that stuff that had me as the reason why, putting him closer to the line of scrimmage, allowing him to kind of be that disruptive playmaker in the mold of a Tyrann Mathieu type of role. And I think that you've seen it, last week he has a batted pass. He had 2 interceptions against the Bears. He's always around the ball, and he feels like somebody that is just this close to being able to break out and make another huge kind of splash play. And he's been really, like I said, he's been really good since the month of November and early December. This is somebody that now at the end of 2020, if the Packers win the Super Bowl and their defense plays much better, I think we're going to point to the trajectory of number 26 as a big reason because of that. And then next season, he's going to be one of those guys we're going to be talking about is like, oh man, I am like the hype that we were giving this year for Jair is the level of hype we're going to be giving next year for Darnell Savage. You guys go ahead and mark that down right now. I think as far as the Nick Collins stuff, Nick Collins has a pick 6 in the Super Bowl, and our colleague, Mr. Tim Backus, promised a pick 6 in the Super Bowl from Darnell Savage. So if that comes to fruition, then I'm going to have a nice new newspaper right over here that says World Champions on it, and it's going to have Darnell Savage doing this in the end zone, I guess, because that's just the way that it works. So 26 Savage, if you're listening, February 7th, it's pick 6 time, baby. So get rolling. That's bold predictions, unless you got more, Jason.
No, that was it. I should have led with the rushing one because that was the one that was going to turn more heads than anything. But the 2 turnovers, I think, is going to end up being really, really key. And that's a lot to ask against a team that's taken. I think like I said, Tannehill, 4 or 5 interceptions on the season, not very many. Derrick Henry, 1 fumble. They just don't turn the ball over. Neither team does.
Nope. And that's why it's going to be the way that I think it is when we get to predictions, in which we're going to right now. We're going to get to predictions, but Jason, we have 2 games we need to pick because the first game matters to how much this second game matters. And the first game is the Los Angeles Rams against the Seattle Seahawks. The Rams coming off the worst loss any team has taken this season, obviously losing last week to the New York Jets. That's a problem. Anytime you lose to a team that was felt destined for 0-16 and you're a playoff contender, Sean McVay and his boys need to be ready. They do still have an opportunity. If they win tomorrow, they pretty much, they almost can't lose their division, I guess. It would be a win in the final week of the season that they would need to do that. But they have that 2-game tiebreaker. They clinched a tiebreaker against Seattle for that, the 3 seed and the division and all that stuff if they finish with the same record, which they'll certainly need to do. But the reason that game matters is if the Rams win, the Packers will have a chance to clinch the number 1 seed. And I do think the Rams win tomorrow. I think they're coming off of a game where they were embarrassed. Maybe they took the Jets lightly. I know I do poke a little bit at Sean McVay, but ultimately I do believe that Sean McVay is a good coach, and I think he'll have his team ready to go. And I think this is a team, they've always matched up well with Seattle. Even when Seattle was at their peak and the Rams were kind of in the outhouse, they were able to do things. And Aaron Donald alone matches up so well with this team. They have Jalen Ramsey, who can take away DK, or not take away, but at least limit some of the big plays for DK Metcalf. And their defense is fast and aggressive. As long as Jared Goff doesn't make these huge mistakes, which against the Seattle defense is kind of hard to do. Seattle's defense is not good. I know they've played better of recent memory, but they're going to get 40 burgered in the playoffs if they play the Saints or the Packers are dropping 40. Go ahead and write that in ink if you'd like. I think the Rams win, and it sets up the Packers to have a chance to clinch that number 1 seed and make Week 17 pretty much meaningless. Jason, what do you think there?
It's only based on where they're playing the game. It's at whatever they call that now.
The clink.
I'll always call it CenturyLink. It's called something else now, but it's because it's being played there. Last year, the Packers needed some help from the Seahawks in a similar fashion in the last week of the season. It was at CenturyLink Field, and the 49ers were able to hang on and win that game, securing the number 1 seed. We all know what happens when the Packers play in that building. So I think Seattle is going to, I guess, break our hearts a little bit because we want to see the storyline play out and the Packers overcome a huge challenge, beat a tough Titans team, secure the number 1 seed, and then have all the fun storylines and all the decisions to make on how they're going to approach Week 17 against Chicago. I just think Seattle's Russell Wilson and Pete Carroll have just done it too many times. As much as Los Angeles should come out very pissed off about the way they played last week and look to atone for that, and they certainly can, and I hope that I'm wrong. I think Seattle finds a way to get it done in their building, and the Packers will ultimately end up needing Week 17, although you could do a lot worse for an opponent if it's a must-win game than the Chicago Bears.
That they will. So by Jason's point, the Packers game will be relatively meaningless in terms of standings and everything by the time the game kicks off. For me, the Packers will be playing for everything by the time that game kicks off. So that makes things a little interesting, just seeing how they would approach it. I think the Packers will approach it the same regardless, but I think this game's high scoring. I think it goes back and forth. Now, if this game was in Tennessee, maybe I would think a little bit differently. But ultimately, no pass rush, no corners, no nothing against a passing offense. As a passing league, I think they can slow Derrick Henry down enough. Derrick Henry's going to go for over $1. So for everybody saying, oh my God, they couldn't stop him. I mean, yeah, he's going to go for 100 yards. He's a good running back. That's what good running backs do. I think the Packers, I think it's a high scoring game. I think it goes back and forth. I think Green Bay wins. They put up 40. It's 41-37. Those 2 interceptions that Green Bay gets make a huge difference. They hold on late, and we are celebrating a number 1 seed clinching victory on Sunday Night Football and making that Bears game meaningless, which we'll get into storylines and a bunch of different stuff like Jason mentioned for that. So, Jason, the game is meaningless from a number 1 seed standpoint based on your Rams-Seahawks prediction, but what is your prediction for this Packers game?
That they're going to play hard. It's going to still be high scoring, not as high scoring as you have it. But those 2 turnovers, like you mentioned, are going to be very key. I've got it 35-34. It's going to come down to the wire. We're all going to need to take a relaxer after the game, whatever it is that you need. Probably an Irish car bomb or 2. Jake's a huge fan of those to calm the nerves a little bit. But I think the Packers get it done. They find a way to get in the end zone. And what would be nice is if one of those picks had a 6 attached to it. And that's where the 35 came from. Just win. Find a way to get it done. The Packers are playing with a lot of pride and a lot of mojo, and it's their last regular season home game of the year. I know there won't be many fans in the stands, but they like to play hard for the ones that are there. So the good guys win, and they move into Week 17.
Producer Kyle has a prediction as well, which he is certainly able to throw up there if he would like. He likes the Packers 34-31. So
no score got me. That's really disappointing, Kyle.
Yeah, I kind of figured that might be the case, but we're at the end. The Packers play tomorrow night, Sunday Night Football against the Tennessee Titans. They are currently 3-point favorites, which all of us kind of represent by the scores that we have picked here on NBC. Sunday Night Football, Al Michaels, Chris Collinsworth on the call. We are at the end of our show, so be sure to check out us at Game On Wisconsin, at Game On WI on Twitter, Game On Wisconsin on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, GameOnWI.com for all things interested. Thank you to everybody that showed up in the chat today. We appreciate all of you guys going on here, and appreciate everybody that's been with us all season long. Next week will be our last regular season show of the season. It's crazy that we've already gotten here, but the Packers are at their last regular season show, and then hopefully we have a bye week between that and the end of the year. A lot to be decided yet. The Packers will face off against the Titans, hopefully looking to clinch the number 1 seed, which, as I mentioned, that's really all I want for Christmas. But this is Pulse of the Pack. You'll see Jason, myself, and Paul Brettel back next week previewing the Packers and the Bears. Kyle, hit it.